Now, without any further delay, coming to tonight's session on emerging practices for data-driven AI strategy. Let me give an introduction to our distinguished and eminent speaker of tonight, Dr. Sunil Kumar Vuppala. Dr. Sunil is a director of data science at Ericsson Global AI Accelerator, Bangalore. He has 17 plus years of experience in industrial research, in machine learning, deep learning, analytics, Internet of Things, and automation. Dr. Sunil has worked with Oracle, Infosys R&D, and Philips Research before joining Ericsson. He is a lead inventor of 30 patents and published 30 papers and has delivered 100 plus guest lectures. He is a senior member of ACM, IEEE, and a fellow of IETE. Dr. Sunil is one of the top 10 data scientists in India for 2019, recipient of Zinnov Technical Role Model in Emerging Technology Award 2020, IEEE TMS Engineering Manager of the Year 2020, Next 100 winner 2020 as India's future CIO and ACM Distinguished Speaker. He's also a co-chair of industry engagement in the IEEE Bangalore section, a recognized thought leader, and a faculty in premier institutes. Dr. Sunil is an alumnus of IIT Roorkee, IIT Bangalore, and IIM Ahmedabad. A very warm welcome to you, Dr. Sunil. We are absolutely thrilled to have you with us tonight. Handing the session over to you.
Thank you. Thanks for the kind introduction. Just confirm if you can see my screen and listen me as well.
We can see your screen.
Great. Let me minimize as of now. Okay, cool. Very good morning, good evening, wherever you are joining for this particular webinar. So what I'm going to talk for next 30 to 40 minutes, and we'll have some good interaction for Q&A as well. Please punch in the questions in between, but I'll be mostly taking that towards the end. So as part of emerging practices for a data-driven AI strategy, maybe you are seeing to demystify the terminology, we are talking about data-driven AI strategy and what practices we can follow. Because of the vast nature of this particular topic, we are going to go mostly on the breadth of it, and I'll take help of 2-3 frameworks, which I'll give you the references as well. Once you hear these kind of things, maybe sometimes it may be difficult to digest entire information, but if you chew that and then try to apply in your journey, definitely I feel it will be useful. So what I planned for the agenda point of it is we'll just briefly introduce with my few of my thoughts and then try to justify why we are talking about data-driven AI strategy and what kind of challenges we foresee in this and how do you handle that, be it a drift or maybe change in the data and model aspects. What is the need for these buzzwords like trusted AI, edge AI, green AI? These kind of aspects we'll start discussing, deliberating on those. And to support that, we will talk about a couple of trade-offs as a day in and day out, what we can follow in our methodology, which I'll talk about as Plaster plus SET framework. It may be looking like an acronym at this stage, but I'll demystify that. Towards that end, we'll sum up all that and how you can scale up AI. This is what lined up for us. Without further ado, we'll further go to the introductory part first. So maybe let me minimize this. Okay, no problem. So let me share my thoughts with two things. After working more than 10 years in this AI space and then working with different organizations, so what I have seen here is there are two types of approaches mainly, right? One is one set of problems, be it product organization, be it service organization. One set of thought process is, I have an interesting business problem, but I'm not sure what data really helped me to solve that. Another way to look at is, I'm sitting on a pile of data, but what business problems really help me to solve with this data? If you see, both the things are coming from different directions, but what is very important here for us is interesting business problem and valid data. Or both of them are important to really apply AI for us. Another thought process is on the, instead of talking about product and services, we are slowly going to platforms and solutions when it comes to the AI. But these AI can be applied to the, we can build AI-based products and we can build AI-based platforms and solutions, but this is what I am observing in the industry. If you go further ado on this, right, The common terminology these days, as we speak in 2021, is the data-centric AI. Some of the seasoned data scientists, which people are joining here, you may wonder, what is so special about this data-centric one? We are already talking about models, data. Without data, where is the AI, right? So we see common statements like AI is the new electricity, data is food for AI. If you hear from Andrew Ng, or someone else may say data is the new oil. All this is good, but it's not new, right? What we are talking new in 2020 or 2021 in this is the relevant data is the key. Consistency of the data is paramount. What does that mean is, let me give an example. In our standard challenges like Kaggle or other things, we are given a data set, right? And who is the winner is really who built the model to solve that particular problem. But now the new challenges are coming in picture. If you see, recently there was an announcement by Andrew Ng in the deep learning.ai. There was a challenge going on now, I think till another 2-3 more months. He has given a problem and a baseline performance, and the challenge is asking us to change the data. How do you really change it? The data is given, right? But maybe there are some aspects, something like fixing the labels, or what kind of imputations we can use for the missing data, those kind of things, which may come across the producing the high quality data through ML lifecycle. It's not just a data is available in the beginning and we are taking it granted. That's the change what we are talking about. As we understand, AI system is code plus data. And we are already building the model-centric AI in the last few years. Now, why suddenly we are talking about data-centric AI is maybe there is a lot of maturity by this time in terms of deep learning, machine learning, across the different types of data. We have a lot of interesting models already, right? Why can't we leverage that and try to see how can we systematically change the data? Is it very easy or straightforward? No, it's not really easy. That's where all this ML ops, new buzzwords you are seeing, and we'll try to explain some of them here and food for thought for you as well. As I mentioned, 2-3 frameworks, I'll take the help of it. This is one of the framework which I have seen from the MIT. Why it is interesting to start with is when we are talking about data and AI strategy, we need to embed that right from the visionary aspects. Why I'm talking about is you may be working on a product. Just by adding one feature, you can't stamp it as an AI-based product, right? So it needs to be tied up with our vision and strategy. And based on that, we need to understand where we are trying to really apply that. It's okay, there may be a lot of technology already developed, but why it makes sense for our business, right? That's where we need to identify those relevant use cases, create AI portfolio based on the return on investment aspects, and support the data, get the supporting data which is already collected, or maybe you may need to collect new data as well. To do that real aspect of execution of AI strategy or data AI strategy, you need to have enablers, something like you need to have the right set of human skills, you may need to build new teams, new people, you need to adhere to the privacy and ethics, and which you need to build on top of existing architecture and technology. What is very important is it's not just AI products or platforms are going to work in silos, right? We are going to use them or integrate them with our existing products. So it is very important to understand those enablers. And to be very successful, the underlying DNA of organization and governance, all this make the culture of the organization will play an important role. So once you have this kind of DNA, enablers, assets, and ambition, how you can really execute is formulate a data strategy. Understand what is our current state, right? Where you need to really apply, be it in the HR function, be it in the regular main business function, right? We need to understand what is the current state and define a roadmap in a phase-by-phase manner and execute the AI playbooks. That's what this framework is suggesting us. And we'll go into details on what challenges also we face in this journey. We are talking about data, right? But what are the different data types which we can see here? Right. What I'm trying to present here, when I ask that kind of a question to you, maybe you can think, okay, the data is continuous, discrete, or maybe some people can argue it is structured, unstructured. There are no standard definitions, right? But if you go details of that, so my way of representing that is maybe on these 7 types. It may be numerical, categorical, text, image, video, if it is in nothing of anything else, then it may be of signal, general signal. So what is it completely new? No, I just talked about the aspects of it with a specific reason, or maybe a justification for that is the pre-processing may depend on this data type, and we can follow the standard methodology for that. Right? What are the examples of this numerical kind? Some of them are self-explanatory, like text, image, and video, and similarly the numerical thing. Maybe the signals is more like ECG, voltage, and those kind of signals. Is it just for a generic thing, or maybe can I take an example of any specific domain like insurance, healthcare, like that? Right? You can see for each of the examples like numerical blood reports, sugar report, or kind of thing, or categorical COVID-19 positive, negative, or text, maybe the claim reports, emails, log data. Then image, maybe X-ray image, photos. Then videos, we can talk about CT scan. We are talking about COVID-19. CT scans is becoming more popular these days, right? So apart from that, it can be ultrasound, MRI, any of those. Speech, yeah, the people who are the doctor consultations, technicians discussions, signals can be ECG, EMG. Yes, we understand these data types, then so what, right? But some of the things are really dependent, as I mentioned, pre-processing is one aspect. And second thing is, some data is very much visible for you as if you are collecting, but there may be chances in the organization, dark data. Right? What does that mean? The dark data aspect of it is, as the name indicates, it is collected by organization, but left in dark. That means they are not really using it. Some industries I have seen, because of the COVID-19 situation, maybe they are getting enough time now to revisit whatever they collected and then bring up some new use cases. That data can be structured or unstructured. You may wonder, if the people are not really trying to use it, what is the fun in collecting that? There may be a number of reasons. It may be for regulatory purposes or compliance purposes. They may be collecting it, or storing their data is much cheaper, right? But as you see, you are missing a lot of valuable insight if you are not really using the data. You may be sitting on a pile of data without much using it, but what you need to, as the data is available, what is still stopping the organizations, right? Maybe the prioritization, or maybe it requires a lot of robust infrastructures, be it in cloud or even in the local, to handle these volumes. It's not trivial, right? And we require the domain expertise really to identify the sweet spots. We can use even AI ML to read between the lines. Usually we will say data is required for AI, and we are talking about AI for data as well, the new way of looking at it. What kind of use cases maybe the dark data talks about? Let's say automatic claims handling by insurance, be it COVID-19 claims or maybe regular insurance claims, right? How do you do that? Maybe a lot of huge pile of data of manual thing may be there. Maybe they can process that, okay, using the technology and keep it ready for the automatic claims handling. Or every click of the information, the e-commerce sites may be capturing it. How can they convert the users to the really customers? How do you identify the potential new customers? There are interesting use cases like this. Are these only just 2-3 examples? Not really. If you talk about these points, let me just move this a little bit. Right? Okay, so the main point I'm trying to convey here is to show you a picture which shows almost like 24, 25 different verticals. What are the uses of AI, right? It's not limited to one particular industry, right? And my aim here is not to go through each and everything, which may take easily a couple of hours to describe, but to excite you as you are coming from different backgrounds and representing different industries. There is AI, even though the maturity levels may be little different, there are usages of AI, right? But is it like a smooth sailing, everything is solved? Not really, right? So that's where we'll talk about these challenges here. What kind of challenges we are going to address here? This is one of the key takeaways for this particular session. After understanding, yes, there is a need for the AI-driven data strategy. Let's go a little more deeper into that and come back and sum up towards the end. And I was just thinking, what is the best way to present the challenges? What I was presented here is, maybe we'll start with our data science typical life cycle and how do you follow. We'll address some of the challenges and go deep dive into data related aspects. and then we'll introduce the new techniques on that. First, to start with, one challenge is creating the right use case where the return on investment is very essential, right? Because of the COVID-19, we know the business pressures for our production platforms or maybe the solutions. The easiest way to identify there is some of the cases AI hype. Because of AI hype, it may look like AI is a hammer for every problem. But instead, you can try to see whether we are creating long-term assets or maybe the low-hanging. Sometimes it may be a simple automation case to solve a problem. Fine, let's do that with automation and identify interesting problems for where AI can be applied. In some cases, you may be sitting on a lot of unstructured data. What kind of right embeddings we need to use? Is it always a latest and greatest methodology like transformers for text data or some kind of a normalized pixel data for images? Need not be. The choice could be, I'll give you a different dimension from green AI. It may not be always the latest technology which you can really apply. There are multiple ways or multiple parameters you can consider as a product manager or as a solution architect while really taking the choices, not just only model, because the general notion is I'll talk about, yes, data science, or this one is mostly as a crazy for model building. I'll say that is not even 20%. There is a lot of aspects from the other life cycle aspects. Then other point is performance evaluation due to drift. Yes, we built a sophisticated model and then, giving good results in terms of accuracy, sensitivity, specificity. We deployed it. But due to the change in pattern of these COVID, the patterns of the users changed and it is no more performing as expected. There is a concept, data drift kind of techniques, which we need to understand and try to follow some kind of a retraining techniques. I'll deep dive because of that importance of that particular topic in the upcoming slide. When it comes to the model building, we have seen a lot of maturity in the last few years. You can try to use maybe some kind of a transfer learning techniques. May not be only from your domain, even from other domains as well, especially to reduce the development time. And next challenge is in terms of the model maintenance. Yes, a lot of the stakeholders these days understand it's not like a static model built once and then it will work forever. So we need to think of some kind of ML flow or for some kind of a tools like for ML ops. It's becoming buzzwords. Initially, I think last year I was talking about AI ops, ML ops. It's not standardized, but as we speak in 2021, mostly people are adhering to the term of ML ops. Why that is required? Is it just for the maintenance? Not really at the end of model maintenance, even if it can play the role in the data augmentation based on error analysis. Right? Or even you can think of more data labels, you can review it. If it is really adding value, then it's perfectly fine. Otherwise, you have liberty to change the data from the domain expertise as well. Definitely the retraining model is also part of it. To go a little deep dive into the drift concepts, there are so many buzzwords here we will hear on the drift. I'll try to simplify and try to explain it for you. The drift point of it, first one is the data drift. We just see you talk about data is X and then let's say Y is labels. There may be change in X, there may be change in Y, or maybe there is a change in X to Y, right? So these names are coming in that direction. Data drift means, let's say the data X. The change in the distribution of the data used in a predictive task is data drift. Whereas concept drift means this happens when the statistical property of the target variable, the Y changes. Model drift is that relationship between X and Y is changing. So why it will change? Because you might have seen the data change in the last few years. Maybe COVID is a good example, right? But even without COVID also, you can see a lot of seasonality changes and the pattern changes. Sometimes it may be a sudden drift, right? Suddenly everybody is working from home. There are a lot of patterns changed. Then there is a gradual drift. Okay, it's not like suddenly changing, but you are getting symptoms in between and then it changes. Another one is an incremental drift, right? A old concept, right? It is incrementally changes to a new concept. Or there may be a reoccurring concept. So it changes, but it come back again. So something like reoccurring means maybe the pattern in the first wave of COVID, maybe one time everything is in the lockdown phase. Then it comes back to some kind of a normal situation. Again, the lockdown situation in the phase 2 or phase 3 kind of a thing, right? So like this in the real situation, we'll get a lot of drifts. Once you understand the distribution of these drifts, There are multiple ways which are available in the literature. Something like online learning, periodic retraining, model weighting, or maybe feature dropping. Some of the features it may not be very relevant now with the change in the distribution. So this may be to address the general data drift, but based on if it is a sudden drift, maybe feature dropping and model weighting may work better. These are kind of a cheat sheets we are talking about. If you're really identified, yes, it may be, if it is a gradual drift, maybe online learning is a better method. Seasonal drift, maybe periodic retraining may be a better. So it's more like a hints for us to start with and then try and how it is working on our models. Similarly, concept drift, maybe periodic retraining, and explicitly relabel, maybe by taking the help of the human experts. So this is one of the challenge, the drift point of it. Is it not there a couple of years ago? Why we are talking about this? That question may come to you. We are not talking, I mean, the data drift is maybe 2-3 years only people are talking about, not much before. The main reason is initially it is more into the research, more into the small pilots. In the last few years only we are talking about real deployment, democratization. That's why these kind of data driven strategies are taking maybe center stage as we speak now. Other aspects to digest now is on the three buzzwords I introduced, something on the trusted AI. That's a very big term. IBM defines in its own way. Our organization, Ericsson, defines its own way. But what I'm trying to here represent is a generic methodology for you to understand. It includes explainability aspects, ethical aspects, robustness aspects. It's a bigger thing. We can't solve everything, but I'm trying to give you some specific challenges. How do we address it previously with that experience? How you can follow that as a tips to follow, right? One is fairness versus bias. We want the model to perform very maybe without any bias and understand the fairness aspect, right? We need to meet that fairness rate as well. That may occur in different stages. Okay, why we put a star mark of bias point of it. If you go into real theory, the cognitive biases are more like 170 types of biases. We are not able to address all of them in the near future. It takes a huge amount of effort and time. But at least the interesting ones or maybe the prominent ones, something like a data collection level, maybe sample bias, exclusion bias, automation bias, or maybe something at an attribute level, observer bias. As an observer, I have a bias while giving the label, or availability bias, prejudice bias. So maybe based on the data availability, right? At least we should be able to address those prominent ones. Maybe at a pre-processing level, if you see, we need to de-bias the collection of data. Or if it is in processing level, we may need to use adversarial models. If it is at a post-processing stage, you can use some kind of a fairness score. Maybe above that, you need to have that. There is no best solution, as you see in most of the cases. It's kind of a Pareto optimality or Pareto efficiency. We need to balance it out. Definitely, domain knowledge also comes into play in that particular, in handling that. If you're talking about specific problems within that, let's say unbalanced data set, maybe it is very common problem for us. Maybe take a COVID example itself. I keep taking that because it's very live and most of you can relate it to as well. Maybe when you are doing 1,000 tests, maybe 10 are positive or 100 are positive, right? So when we are really trying to build that model, be it using the chest X-ray images or maybe CT scans or maybe a structural data, you need to handle that unbalanced set, right? The minority class, maybe using smooth kind of a statistical method or generative adversarial networks before thinking of a model building. How do you mitigate the unwanted bias, right? Understand the inherent bias by humans. While giving the label itself, there may be a bias. Or why can't you take the help of explainable AI? That's another field for us in terms of taking the help of explainability. There are a lot of packages available these days. Only thing is people are not really using it. If you take, why we need to do that? To open up the black box. No more a black box. Okay, we want to understand why or how it is really working, so that the data scientist also can tweak the parameters. At the same time, we can take the help of these explainable models to get the regulatory approvals for the models as well. Similarly, privacy is a bigger concept, right? How do you address it? Maybe by anonymizing the data. Whatever the public data available for you, mostly it is anonymized. Or you can use federated learning techniques if you don't have the maybe permission to load the data at a central place, keeping the GDPR and those kind of privacy rules. Then differential privacy, okay, it may be true anonymity point of it, and then there is, you can add the noise to regular data set to handle this differential privacy aspects. All these combined together, we are talking about building the solutions responsible, traceable. There are a lot of these adjectives you may see, but all come under this trusted AI. So the closing comment there is, without this ethical and responsible use, maybe data strategies and AI solutions might work technically, I can prove it, but may not deliver the expected outcome at a business level. So it is important for us to identify these apart from just changing the accuracy. Another angle or another dimension I want you to think through is, as of now, we talk about the best model is maybe getting the best accuracy or maybe best sensitivity, specificity, whatever the evaluation criteria is. But we want to introduce to you something like a green AI as a point. Along with the primary evaluation criterion like accuracy, you try to see energy efficiency. How do you really measure that? If you see the historical data these days, it's not like how many layers you really used it. Do you really require 100 layer network, 150 layer network to solve it? If I want to deploy my model at a edge device like a mobile or a webcam or maybe a CCTV or maybe a drone, you may not really require, right? So that's where we are trying to bring in our the concept of edge AI and this green AI point of it. It's not just only at the inference stage. Even while during the training, we may be tempted to use, maybe using transfer learning methodologies, the best model that is available, let's say, as of last week. But we need to understand our own needs. And let's say, giving an example of GPT-3 or any of those sophisticated models, it takes huge amount of carbon footprint to run the models. So do you really require it for your model or not? You need to judge, right? So, and another aspect is on the edge point of it, on the edge of a network, we can minimize the latency and bandwidth needs if you build a model there, right? And we can get an extra benefit of improved privacy and security aspects because the data lies there and we are trying to run it there itself. And we can use the best practices these days. There are a lot of reproducible code, be it in GitHub, be it in the conferences like Neuro IPS, right? They are giving not just only paper, even the code along with that. Why can't we use that, right? So that we can use the optimization from hardware and software perspective. There are a lot of efforts from NVIDIA, Intel, and all these hardware vendors. Using their libraries, you can perform much better in terms of those calculations. Why can't we use that? Right now, we matured a lot in the last few years. It's a plug and play kind of a thing. When we used these couple of years ago, it's more like even to set up, it takes a couple of hours or a couple of days. We crossed that stage. So it is readily available for that. That's why we are advocating for green AI. When we talk about a lot of these concepts, how do you fit in all these, right? Let me take a help of the Plaster plus set framework. But before that, where you can really apply while you are building these solutions, right? You can apply it in the EDA level. Sometimes you fail fast. Apply all these distributions and all. If it is not really working out, the data is not sufficient, call it out there. Don't really waste the resources and time there. Pick up another use case. Apply the right set of embedding so that when you are going till the modeling level, you understand the right set of data, right? Then define the right hypothesis, keep that objectives clear and understand the end goal. Based on that, you shortlist the methodologies for model building and use this at every stage. I'll talk about in the next slide. And having that iterative mindset and using that ML ops mainly for versioning, retraining at a different stages is also very important. So what is this acronym Plaster plus set we are talking about, right? So what we are referring here is a Plaster as an acronym which was given by NVIDIA CEO, I think 3-4 years ago. What he was talking about is P for programmability, latency, accuracy, size of the model, throughput, energy, efficiency, rate of learning. All these are very basic terminology where most of you understand already, right? When you talk about this kind of Plaster as an acronym, what is helping us here is we need to have a trade-off of these parameters based on our requirements, so that it's not just only development of the model, we are trying to take care of the end-to-end deployment aspects. I extended it further a little bit on we need to take care of explainability, security, and training time as well. Right? Total, these 10 parameters will help us to build the best model for that particular situation. So see where your end goal requires to be. Based on that, you take the right set of choices. Right? As one example, security versus explainability. Explainability is required to get the approval and to get adoption. But at the same time, if you make your model more explainable and then flush out a lot of details, then it may be prone to the security attacks. Right? So you should have the gating mechanism to what level we need to give the explainability, to what level we need to secure the model. These kind of trade-offs as a product manager or as a data scientist or a solution architect, it is very important for us to get the successful implementation of using these models. So to summarize those points in terms of virtuous cycle of AI, some of you might have heard of this, right? What is there as a virtuous cycle for us is, yes, to build a great product, I need good amount of data. How we get the good amount of data? If I have good users. But in the beginning, maybe I may not have too many users, too much of data, but still it's a virtuous cycle that way. Maybe build a product and then that may not be the best to start with, a model you are building and then giving a product, and then that we can attract more users. The users can generate more data. That way you can improve that process. You may have your own industry specific advantage, which you can uniquely position, even though there may be new entrants in the market, right? For solving that particular problem. We will touch upon this again on the virtuous cycle, but this is basic thing which you need to understand. Another aspect is why AI strategies fail. We talked about, yes, there are a lot of technological developments happening. And then we talked about a lot of buzzwords now. Yes, data-centric AI is coming into picture, and we need to take off the help of this Plaster plus set kind of a frameworks. We talk about ethical AI, trusted AI, but still having all this beautiful technology around, or a lot of transformation journey is around, why still the AI strategies fail? When we collected the data, and I given the reference as well, if you are interested, you can take a look in a deep dive. But the data shows from that report is there are a lot of aspects, but I'm trying to present a brief of it. Machine learning is all about data. We all agree that, but there are data quality issues. Andrew Ng says maybe good data is a need of the work. I'm using maybe relevant data, but ultimately the message is common here. We want to make sure, how do you address the data quality issues? Maybe you may say that, okay, unless I have this much quality of the data, I can't start the project. It may be easy to put that kind of a rule. But in that case, you know the real world demand, you can't really start the project as well, right? The time will just pass on to get. At the same time, if you start with a bad quality data, garbage in, garbage out. So you need to have a trade-off. What is the minimum requirement for you to start with? Then in the process, you can clean up the data as well, along with the model building aspects, right? So then another aspect is data may be available, but it may be stored in too many systems. There are many different synergies you may need to bring in finally to make the data available and make it available for model building. There are so many aspects of that. Similarly, as industry is facing a lot of AI talent is still in high demand. If I want somebody, let's say, expertise in telecom and AI, understand the domain, and an expert in AI, it will be difficult. It may be difficult to get for any particular domain. But as you go in next few years, maybe 2-3 years down the line, you may get a specific expertise, having the domain knowledge plus the knowledge of AI as well. Right? To sum up those points, what we have heard so far, I have taken the help of our last framework from Capgemini. How do you really scale up this data-driven AI strategy aspect, right? There are 4 simple principles. One is on monitor and amplify. The virtuous cycle, as we mentioned, start building the model and an iterative mindset, monitor the model accuracy and have a business impact to amplify the outcomes. Right? And another aspect is empower. what does that mean is you try to provide the trusted and high quality data. And once you provide the right set of tools as well, we are empowering to build or scale up the AI. The third aspect is really operationalizing it. You can deploy the AI and you need to choose the right set of operating model, right, based on your own privacy rules and embedding ethics and governance of our own organization. And last point is it may not be everything may not be built in house, so you can have the collaboration with the partners to make it really scalable. Be it your cloud partners, be it your technology partners. Collectively, we can have the scaling of AI to drive the data-driven AI strategy. So what we talked about so far in last 35 to 40 minutes, why we need to have a data-driven AI strategy. Then what are the different challenges across the data science life cycle spectrum we talked about, with a little more emphasis on how we can handle the data drift. Then why there is a need for trusted AI, ethical AI is embedded into that. Then edge AI and green AI, why these buzzwords are coming, what are the core principles for us as a data scientist or a data product managers, we need to understand those. And once you understand all these aspects, our aim is to have the trade-offs of this plaster plus frame set kind of a framework. That is one example I have given, right? You can have your own framework derived from there, but having that kind of a framework will be helpful for us to really scale up, right? And at the same time, meet the objectives of the organization, identifying the right set of use cases, and at what level you need to take a courageous decision, whether it is going in the right direction or do I need to stop there and pick up a new use case. And it's not always a best model to build. The best always depends on the real world situation. So whether it is only accuracy, we talked about energy efficiency, there are multiple aspects to take into consideration so that as a data scientist and product managers, we can take the right set of decisions for the trade-offs to follow these emerging practices and contribute to the data-driven AI strategy at the end to solve interesting business problems. With that, there are a lot of interesting references which I have given. I can share it with you. And I know there are some questions which we will take up at this stage.
Thank you, Dr. Sunil, for that brilliant session. Really great and thought-provoking insights. Yes, and we do have questions lined up for you already. So let's begin with the Q&A. And audience, if you want to come online and ask your question live to Dr. Sunil, please go ahead and raise your hand and I can unmute you and you can have a discussion with him right now. So Dr. Sunil, you can see the questions too in the Q&A window while I read it out.
Yeah.
So the first question is from Nikhil. Data is more useful in B2B product or B2C product? And according to you, for which of these will you give more prioritization?
Okay.
A, data-driven decisions, B, user behavior-driven decisions, or C, market-driven decisions?
Interesting question, Nikhil. So actually, that particular point is really useful both for B2B and B2C. I worked in both these cases. It's not like it is useful only in one of them, right? That is the first question. Second question is, when you see, even though market-driven, user behavior-driven, ultimately that is also giving us the data, right? So what I will say there is, in terms of prioritization, it depends on the real business value we are trying to give at the end. So what does that mean is, especially if you are trying to get into the user behavior, that's the need, that's the need of the hour, to be frank, right? How the customer behavior changed over the COVID. It may be impacted positively for some organization. It might have impacted negatively, right? If you ask me, these, even though the data-driven decisions are part of both of them, based on a specific use case, you can pick it up, and maybe I can give priority in general to the user behavior point of it.
Great. I hope that answers your questions, Nikhil. And you can post your answers in the chat window or come online and let us know your thoughts. Suresh has raised his hand, Dr. Sunil, so I'm going to unmute him.
Yeah, please.
Suresh, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, the difference between a normal product manager and AI product manager, right? What are the extra things that AI product manager should kind of keep in mind. I know, of course, data is there in both the cases when I kind of prioritize my requirements and everything, right?
Yes.
But in a normal product manager, generally, when I talk to customers, I can empathize with customers, can understand their needs, right?
Correct.
Whereas AI product management is generally most of the time customer does not know what actually he wants, right? Then how
Correct.
a product manager should be a little bit different to validate his thoughts, what should be
Yeah.
automated and where I should bring in machine learning.
Interesting question, Suresh. So, what I see the real world challenge there is also if it is a typical product kind of a thing, the person may have the full knowledge of it, and then maybe executing a typical project is not new for that particular group of people, right? But for us, because it's a new area, and especially the main difference I see in the real world is having that iterative mindset, right? It may not, and we start with usually hypothesis in AI kind of a thing, and we'll try to prove it or maybe accept it or reject it kind of a thing. That's not the typical case with any product feature, right? So that kind of difference you should be able to digest and at the same time able to convince with the proof points to the other stakeholders as well. And believe me, it's not straightforward in one shot. You can't convince them, right? But if you really try to explain once and after that make it convincible with the POC is what we have seen in the real world, so that they will really see the difference in terms of how a typical AI feature versus a typical product feature will differ in the real world.
So,
Yes, please.
so basically, what you mean to say, it is more of iterative.
Yes.
Then, and also for that customer also should be agree to share his data, right?
Agree to share with the data at the
Otherwise,
same
then
time
only you
having
can
that
move.
mindset as well, right? Otherwise we may be getting a problem statement, but it is not like a deterministic in nature. It's more like a probabilistic or maybe a hypothesis kind of a thing in our AI world. We can't uh, completely adhere to, let's say he may give a statement, I want some 95% accuracy, you need to improve this particular system. To accept that in a AI based environment, you need to see whether do we have sufficient data to support that to reach to that level, right? So that's why I'm saying it is an iterative mindset, and understanding the AI basics is very important even for the product manager, so that you can speak the language because you are already an experienced person in that particular domain for that product. But having that AI hat also will help you to speak the right terminology with other people on both the sides, one from the technocrats at the same time to the business people.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Suresh, for coming forward and asking your question. And I encourage others also to do the same. The next question, Dr. Sunil, is from Arudra. We are having an invoice management product and we want to build AI-based model. So the algorithm will suggest that user what loans and insurance are available for their business. Can you suggest any AI-based model we can use and where we can get the data sets?
Okay, so there is one clue I can give. There is something like papers with code.com, right? So you can just Google it. I will type it for you as well. So that is one of the papers with code.com, right? So there, whether your invoice management data available, I doubt, but you can search for that first. Okay, that is one of the place I think right now more than 4,200 or 300 data sets are being there. Right? Some may be available like a Kaggle challenges, some maybe some organization kept it open, right? So that is one way to get it into. That's the first point. Then if that is not available, then what is the place for you is you will have data within your organization, right? If you are coming from that, having an invoice management product kind of a thing, right? You may need to collect the relevant data from there. Then for building the AI-based model, the algorithm will suggest the user. Okay, so one is you need to see what is the predictability or pattern you are trying to get it into that, right? If you see the point here, if you already have what kind of loans or insurance this particular users have, you may need to the AI will come into picture only if you are trying to use that historical data to predict it, right? You need to formulate that way. First, you need to check what kind of data you have availability. Are you using that data to predict for some of the new users who don't have any of these data and you need to fill it up is one way to look at. Or how do you predict for the existing users itself, right? The formulation of the problem is important there, where AI ML can play an important role.
Thank you, Dr. Sunil, for answering that so well. So moving on to the next question. This is from Rohit Nagpal. The product concept we are working on includes live video feed being analyzed at the source, example, mobile app in real time. However, the overall performance is dependent on internet connectivity. In case we go with Edge AI, what are some practical challenges in this scenario? Also, we have to store the video feed for compliance purposes for some time. In case we use Edge AI, how and where should we store the video feed?
Yeah, good point, Rohit. So in your case, the video feed point of it, when you are really talking about identifying in the real time, right? So maybe I'm sure you are using some kind of a computer vision methodologies to solve your particular problem, even though you haven't mentioned explicitly that problem. So what I expect there, you have a hybrid solution, right? Because you have compliance purpose to store the video as well, and keeping that storage within the Edge AI will not really help. So what you can have is a hybrid system where whether, as you mentioned, you may not be storing each and every event, but maybe an interesting event can be triggered at a edge level. Only those things you can forward to the next level, right? At a cloud level or at a maybe at a gateway level to store temporarily, and finally to the cloud level. So because it's a real-time application, what I advocate is the hybrid model. At the same time, the internet connectivity, you need to see whether you have still connectivity to the 5G or 4G, 3G. Based on that, you need to see the kind of quality of the video as well, right? You may not get a very good quality of the view. You may not aim to get the very good quality directly to feed in, or even if you feed in that, because of the connectivity issues, you may need to have a drop down or scale down version of it to really store for the compliance purposes. But maybe you may use that direct video with that quality at the edge, right? You can have balanced trade-off of that. That should solve your problem to some extent.
I hope that answers your question, Rohit. You have another question, but please feel free to come forward and ask a question live. So the next question is from a LinkedIn viewer, Dr. Sunil. This is from Maruti. Can AI be trusted with specialized AI chips? If so, do you foresee when such AI chips be commercially be available? What are trends in languages to program AI applications?
Yeah, there are a lot of set of questions. So let me answer one by one.
Yeah.
So first question is yes. So we are going to it's not like only a software can secure the model, right? So as you mentioned, there may be a chips which may be secure, but my approach for that answer is always it's a hardware plus software kind of a thing. So there may be a secure chip may come, and then on top of it, we are talking about adding the software, relevant software as well, right? So it's a hybrid model which can sustain or survive in this hybrid world, especially when we're talking about edge level, because a chip also, whether we are talking at a public cloud level or maybe at a edge level or at a secure environment of a private cloud level, right? So by virtue of its placement itself, you will get the more security, right? But some of them which are exposed to the world, you may need to take care a lot, whether it is a model inversion attacks, model evasion attacks, right? Or poison attacks. There are multiple attacks really possible. So that's answer for the first point. But when it is really available at a cheaper rate, will take time, and always the security is a question. The best one, it may take a lot of time, right? But there are already efforts in terms of bringing that software plus hardware kind of a thing. My assumption is within 1-2 years, it should become at least commercially available. And to democratize it, it may take a little more time. It depends on the cost as well, right? Then there is a third question in terms of
what are
programming
languages? Yes,
languages, right? So, yeah. So the languages point of it, right now the Python is leading it. As most of you know, Python is older than even Java, but in the last 10 years, it picked up the momentum. We use R as well to some extent, but mostly if you see the trend, Python is winning the game. At the same time, it's not just only Python. there is something like a PySpark and other variants of it, right? On top of using the base Python, they developed other frameworks kind of a thing, extended scalable kind of models building. So you may need to follow on those to really use in the live thing. The initial one, the Python is good enough, but on top of that, you may need to take the help of other extended versions and frameworks to really use it.
Thank you, Maruti, for that question. And I hope Dr. Sunil has done justice to it. So the next question is from Deepa Deshpande. Mm-hmm. How should we make sure the curiosity quotient of a customer is answered with non-explainable AI?
Tricky question, I'll say. Make sure the curiosity quotient of a customer is answered with non-explainable. Why we should be non-explainable AI? If that person is not a tech-savvy person, so you can't really win the argument with, okay, I have this much 95%, 100%. That may not be convincible point, right? But at the same time, if you see what kind of a language you need to use, whether he's a regulator, okay, the customer point of it you are talking about, the customer is in what domain, right? Whether it is in a healthcare domain, is a doctor or is a practitioner, depending on the particular domain, you may need to speak in his language. And when we say the explainable point of it, it's more like a visual representation. Sometimes the mathematical numbers may not convince him, but still, take example of healthcare I'm just talking about. Let's say doctors, they may not bother what you are building the model, whether it's machine learning, deep learning, let it be a black box for me. But when you are trying to say the COVID example for a radiologist, okay, I have a chest X-ray, it is COVID positive, I can predict it's a positive or negative. How you convince the customer, the curiosity quotient of customer, by just saying that, okay, I have a model, this is the model behind it, none of his business, right? But if you are able to explain with the image, saying that, pinpoint why I'm making the decision, highlight that portion, that may be a convincing point to justify for the customer, right? So those are the approaches which we are trying to help by taking the explainable AI, not really talking on the technology point of it. So can we make it simplify for the customer or maybe for the other stakeholders to really understand what's happening so that they can give the feedback as well, right? It's not just even convincing only. We are not stopping the thing. It's always a feedback loop. So we want to take their feedback. Yes, we are doing good. The model is doing good. Perfect. We can go for the regulators and doing that. But if it is not, then at least you can take that feedback and further improve the model.
Dr. Sunil, I hope we can take a few more questions. It's about 9 and we can take 2 more questions. Is that okay?
Yeah, no problem.
Right. So we have Siba Prasad here wanting to come forward and ask his question. Siba, please go ahead and ask your question. I have unmuted you.
Yeah. So much. Really, it was insightful that the presentation. So I have a question that I come across with. In service industry work that we build a product, we have the training data that we build the product and it is accuracy and everything is fine. But in the real time that we don't have the data, that we are kind of in a stage that whether we will work in that the real time environment because we have not exposed the model to the real time data, maybe the different industry. So in that, how do we handle, how do you convince, okay, this in your data that it will work? Means there is a lack of data in the real time.
Mm-hmm. So you don't have permission to capture that. Let's say you identified as of now, they are not capturing, for instance. Anything stopping you to capture the data for a few days or few weeks so that you can show the insights?
There's some cases that they have the regulation, they stop us that to go and export their data. They, business stakeholder, they immediately see kind of result that that to excite them that they'll go for the product, right? So it is difficult for them to wait and say that ask for the data. That will be, they will take a back set. Okay, we'll think about it. So
okay. So sometimes I can get an analogy here. So when there are regulations like this, you are not supposed to capture the data. But as a user, you have seen the data, right? Some parameters, some because you are working in that one. So usually without violating any of the particular privacy or ethics kind of a point of it or regulatory rules, people will try to create the synthetic data. right, based on their experience so far, and then create a dummy data and try to build the models on top of that as an initial model that may not be perfect models, and show the value why their existing rule-based systems or existing systems where there is a lack of identifying the patterns, how this kind of a simple models which you try to create offline is also going to help. That may be an interesting point for you to try it out and then convince the persons, and let them, if you don't have permission regulatory point of it, you need to convince them to capture the data and maybe make it available in a secure environment. But to convince them, you may need to use your domain experience to create that synthetic data to start the trigger.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Siva, for coming forward. We'll take this one last question, and I'm
No
muting Rohit Nagpal right now. Rohit, please ask your question.
Thank you, Shama. So the question is on virtuous cycle of AI. The question is, what is the right time to productionize a model in a new product which has a relatively less number of users?
Rohit, your voice is getting cut.
I'm able to hear, and that too, his question is already there, right? So,
right. Okay. Okay, go for it.
Yeah. I'm able to make sense of that. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Please go ahead, Rohit.
Okay. So the thing is that if we release the model a little earlier, users may not like it at all and they will become detractors. However, if we wait for a longer period of time, there is always competition that, moves ahead of you.
Correct. That's a very good question. So there may not be explicitly the number, like you should reach 90%, 80%. It will be difficult as the nature of the question itself, right? But what I will say there, based while you are understanding your competition, right? So one benchmark can be, if you are doing it for the first time, that particular product, you don't have much competition, then you have liberty to, there is no benchmark, right? But usually in these kind of a new product kind of a thing, definitely you may have some benchmark existing in the literature outside, or maybe from your competitors. So that can be, if you are reaching at least the benchmark or you are close to the benchmark, then you can take the risk of releasing it as well. You don't really require to make it much more tunable to reach it. And second aspect is, there are always corner cases, right? While you are really training it and then testing it, the data is going to be drifted, the situations of the outside COVID or other things. But there are some, if you leave out the corner cases, is the model performing satisfactorily, at least on the regular straightforward cases? You need to focus on those. At least some crowd who are in that particular data distribution point, then there may not be negative comments on that, right? So you do the rigorous testing. Otherwise, if the testing you are missing on that, or maybe the validation or testing phase, right? If you are missing on those, then it will backfire, as you rightly mentioned. So having that benchmark, and if you don't have benchmark, where do you start with? Then at least see this. Except the corner cases, you are able to handle the most of them to the satisfactory level, and then reaching to the end, maybe the end goal point of it, you need to see whether it is impacting. In case of healthcare, it may be impacting a life if you make a wrong decision. In case of a recommendation of in a Amazon kind of a product, it may be just losing a small set of business, right? You see where you are really applying, and compare it with the human performance. That's another trend. If you don't have a benchmark of any model and all that, as a human, how much you are able to, if the model performance is compared with the human thing, is it at least a comparable thing, if not beating the human thing? So these 3 points should help you out to decide when to release, or maybe have that minimum baseline to release your initial product.
Thank you.
Great. So in view of the time constraints, we will have to end the Q&A here. Thanks for the participation, audience, and for any further questions, you can get in touch with Dr. Sunil over LinkedIn or other mediums, if that's okay with you, sir.
Yeah, definitely. I already shared those, so feel free to. That's why I kept this particular session. It's not like one-way traffic and just dumping the knowledge. So I hope we've done justice to around 20 minutes to Q&A and around 30-35 minutes to talk. So
yes,
thanks
absolutely.
for the opportunity.
Yes.
Thanks for the opportunity. I hope we are able to trigger some thought process to some of you, and then hopefully we all understand the real world challenges and use the technology to solve the real world problems. Thank you.